Hey, good morning and good evening to all my participants. Hope I'm audible and my screen is visible to everyone. So I bring on the screen the curriculum for Falcon Responder certification. Now, CrowdStrike has updated all the certification curriculum this year in February and March. So you can see here at the bottom of the page, it says last updated February 2026. As part of this change or as part of this update, what CrowdStrike has done, CrowdStrike has tried to balance the concepts or the coverage between CrowdStrike Certified Falcon Responder and CrowdStrike Certified Falcon Hunter. So what they have done, they have moved the CrowdStrike query language or the or some of the topics from Falcon Responder to Falcon Hunter and vice versa. That's what they have done. Since we will be covering all the modules, let's just focus on what is available in this module as part of the module syllabus. So if I scroll it down, all of these TOCs are available on SharePoint and you all have access to that SharePoint site. So look at the exam objectives. Now, these are the objectives of the exam. Now, the other thing that I informed you, if you remember last time, that CrowdStrike certifications, when it comes to the market value, they don't have, uh, I'm saying, take it this way that you would not find recruiters or hiring managers putting certification as mandatory aspect. What they expect is knowledge, experience on CrowdStrike technologies. That's what they expect. And there is no exception to it when you appear for an interview. However, certification is not mandatory. They would not expect you to have active certification on that specific module. They do not expect that. And there's a reason for it. Why there's a reason for it? The reason is these certifications are very expensive. Each certification would cost you 250 US dollar. And there are 7 certifications. So it's approximately 1750 US dollar that you will pay to gain these certifications. So not all certifications are as important or equally important. However, if you ever want to do certification, I will let you know what certification you need to focus on. There are two main certification. The first is CCFA, which is the fundamental, basic, and most important and the primary certification, for which we have already completed the training session, which is CrowdStrike Certified Falcon Administrator. And the second certification, which is quite popular, which is also in demand, is SIEM Engineer, which is CrowdStrike Certified SIEM Engineer. That is where we primarily cover CrowdStrike SIEM capability with the help of LogScale and Fusion SOAR, which is similar to Microsoft Sentinel, Google SecOps, or Chronicle, or Alert Logic, Securonics, Logarithm, Splunk, QRadar. That's what is also quite in demand. So you will have more participation when it comes to SIEM engineer because a majority of the participants, they are from engineering background. So they chose to go with CCFA, and after CCFA, you will find them once again joining the session in SIEM engineer course because that's once again comes under engineering part. This is these two courses, these two curriculums, CCFR and CCFH, they are more into operations, security operations center. So if you're part of detection engineering, wherein your job is to respond to incidents, investigate incidents, this certification is for you. These two certifications are for you. So let's talk about the objective. So the first objective is talking about attack framework, which is a framework provided by the non-profit org as part of the government of North America. They try to align various security incidents, different types of security attacks, the methods adopted by threat actors. They try to combine all of them into a format and they call it a framework, attack framework. So we'll talk about this framework. Then comes detection analysis. As part of detection analysis, you will learn how to detect and investigate a security incident. So when you receive a detection in CrowdStrike console, you pick up that detection, you open that detection, then what are the areas that you need to look for to be able to take an informed decision in terms of what remediation needs to be done? Whether you would want that detection to remediate as false positive, false negative, true positive, true negative, whether you want the corresponding process, file hash, activity to be added as block list, whether you want that corresponding file hash process or activity to be excluded from further detection because that is false positive. That is all you will learn under detection analysis. Then comes event search. Now, event search will be covered in detail in Falcon Hunter certification. Here, they will just talk about some aspects of event search. Then comes event investigation, which is while investigating a detection, what all areas you're looking into, which talks about process timeline, host timeline, process explorer, all that we will be looking here. Then comes search tool. How do you search for a specific information? So if you have an IP address involved as part of a detection, how do you search for additional details about that IP address? How do you identify the source of that IP address? All that comes into search tool, wherein you will search for user, you will search for an IP, you will search for an hash, you will look at host search results, and you will search for bulk domains. That's the search tool. So what are different open source intelligence tools available to complement you while you investigate incidents? That's what we're going to talk about. Then comes real-time response. This is where you will perform some response activities on the affected endpoints by connecting to those endpoints remotely, not exactly taking the remote of those endpoints, but then connecting to the remote shell of the endpoint. And from the CrowdStrike console, you will be able to push certain files, certain executables. You will be able to kill a specific process. You will be able to fetch certain data. You will be able to execute commands from PowerShell, from command prompt. That's what real-time response is all about. So real-time response comes handy when you are unable to take remote or SSH into the endpoint, when you don't have appropriate access, or the endpoint is part of a different BU or department, wherein it would really take a lot of time to gain access to it. So it reduces the dependency on infrastructure team or the collaboration, uh, overhead that you would end up doing. So imagine a situation wherein there is a malicious process running on the endpoint and you want to end or kill that process. In order to do that, you will need to take remote of the endpoint, SSH into the endpoint, and you don't have access to it. So you will probably bring infra team or application team and request them to perform that activity, which may probably take a couple of minutes to an hour, and that time frame would give an opportunity to threat actor to further spread the threat. So you want to ensure that you reduce the mean time to respond, MTTR. And for that, you have RTR capability. So instead of depending on infra team or application team, you would be able to directly connect to the endpoint from the console and would be able to kill a specific process or start a new process. That's what RTR activities are all about. We will spend quality time here covering this aspect because this is where you will be able to contain the threat. So this is about the syllabus of CrowdStrike Certified Falcon Responder that we are going to cover as part of few sessions. I'm saying as part of today's session, tomorrow's session, and the sessions that we will need to take. Is everyone with me on this? Any questions so far from any participant? Okay, let's move on. So this was about the syllabus. Now the same information is available on the presentation. This presentation will be shared with you at the end of the curriculum. Once we are done with this curriculum, we will update this presentation if required, updating any information with respect to what has changed in the certification curriculum in the last couple of months, with respect to the screenshots which are there. If there is any capability which has been deprecated by CrowdStrike and that capability is part of the screenshot, we would probably, update the screenshots also. So you will receive it at the end of the training session. Okay, so it basically talks about what is CCFR. So it says it's an incident response and remediation module of CrowdStrike. So incident response and remediation. So you respond to incidents. So it says incident detection, response, and remediation. You detect the incidents. Incident is detected by CrowdStrike. You pick up that incident, you investigate, response, and remediate. It enables real-time visibility and control over endpoint during security incidents. So while there are security incidents notified, it provides real-time visibility and control over endpoints. It is powered by RTR, allowing secure remote access to endpoints via command line interface. That's another capability of CrowdStrike, which I was just talking about, that we can remotely connect to endpoints. It's not full-fledged remote desktop session, but it's like connecting via Windows management instrumentation to Cloud Shell or command prompt. Core capabilities of this module is it helps you learn live investigation of a compromised system, execute commands and scripts remotely, retrieve and analyze files from endpoints, perform memory analysis and forensic data collection. And you can also share this data with CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike provides you the capability to upload any forensic data for further investigation. What response actions you can execute on endpoints? You can kill malicious processes. You can delete or quarantine suspicious files. You can contain host, which is network containing the host, which basically means the host will be disconnected from the corporate network or production network, and accept, it would not allow any incoming or outgoing traffic. However, the host will continue to communicate with CrowdStrike management console, and as CrowdStrike Falcon Responder or Falcon Administrator, you would be able to still communicate or instruct the host to perform certain activities. Apply immediate remediation actions. These are the actions that we will take. Then come security controls, role-based access and command restrictions. Now, since this involves remotely connecting to endpoint, deleting a file, uploading a file on the endpoint, killing a process, starting a new activity. Now, these are administrative operations. These are critical operations. So in order to perform these critical operations, there is a separate role which is available, and that role is real-time response. So even Falcon admins do not have this capability. This capability will need to be enabled. So what we have done, we have created a custom role, and in that custom role, we have enabled all the capabilities that you would require as part of previous training on CCFA, which is already complete, as part of subsequent training sessions and the ongoing training sessions. All those required roles are there. Multi-factor authentication for secure access, that's what we have already configured. All of you are logging into CrowdStrike console by satisfying an additional factor authentication. Now you can also configure MFA at RTR level, which basically means before an employee or before a team member is allowed to perform any RTR operations on the endpoint, an additional factor authentication can also be configured. So this entire module, CCFR, is basically designed for rapid incident response, threat containment, and deep endpoint investigation at scale. That's what this module is all about. The screenshot that you see here is basically detection dashboard. So when you navigate to CrowdStrike console on the left-hand side, you see endpoint security. When you hit endpoint security, it opens another drop down. There you will see detections tab. Now there are two detections tab. One is getting deprecated, so we will not use it. We'll use the one that will remain in force in future. So that's what you basically see. You see detections. I'll explain the entire tab to you, all the options. Okay, what are the roles and responsibilities of Falcon Responder? Now, these roles and responsibilities will differ from organization to organization. Sometimes in a small organization, a same engineer will be performing multiple activities. The same person is responsible for configuring policies, response policies, IOCs, and other controls. And the same person is responsible to investigate, respond, and remediate to detections. Or there could be a separate team, a separate engineering team whose job is to design, architect, implement, optimize, and manage the solution in the long run. And there is a separate operations team who are responsible for detecting, investigating, remediating, and responding to security incidents. Then there could be a separate team which is responsible for proactively hunting for threats, which is threat hunting role. So depending on the team size, the team structure, uh, whether it's captive unit or managed security service provider, you will end up either performing some of the responsibilities or most of the responsibilities. Now, specifically talking about Falcon Responder, this person or this role is responsible for analyzing detections and alerts, performing incident triage and investigation, leveraging process trees and host timelines for deep analysis. We'll talk about it. Executing response actions. In the end, once you are done with the entire investigation and you are of the opinion that this detection is false positive. So when I say false positive, it basically means that it's a incorrect or fake detection. Probably CrowdStrike has unnecessarily flagged a legitimate process. It has unnecessarily blocked a legitimate file operations, legitimate application executables. That's false positive, wherein the security software is flagging a legitimate process or execution as malicious. That type of detections or incidents are remediated, are closed as false positive. So depending on how you are closing those incidents or detections, now in the language of CrowdStrike, we call them detections, not incidents. So let's stick to CrowdStrike terminology. So when you are done with investigating the detection, in the end, you will take certain action. So this role would also allow you to perform those actions, which is either containing that specific endpoint for deep dive investigation in future, or terminating a specific process, creating a new process, or performing some remediation actions. Conducting basic threat hunting. Now, basic threat hunting you can do, but detailed threat hunting is part of other module, which is CCFH. Collecting forensic data for further analysis and evidence, using RTR for live endpoint investigation and control, escalating incidents to senior teams when required. So if there is any area or any capability that you don't have access to, and you would need that to be involved, you can probably escalate that incident to your L2, L3, or subject matter expert also. That's what Falcon Responder does. Okay. What are the key skills that we cover in this certification? This is what we are going to cover. We are going to learn how to detect, investigate, triage, remediate, and respond to security incidents. We are going to learn how to use this involves very basic concept of CQL, which is CrowdStrike query language. The detailed concept will be covered in Falcon Hunter as well as SIEM Engineer course. Because in SIEM Engineer, we use log scale query language, which is similar to CQL. So CQL is similar to KQL, which is Custo query language, which is used by most of these SIEM and source solution or threat hunting security solutions. So we'll learn how to perform advanced searches using CrowdStrike query language, investigate events across endpoints. Then comes event investigation. We'll analyze process tree, host timelines. We'll understand attack flow and behavior. Then comes uh, entity-based hunting. What are entities? Entities are users, endpoints, IP addresses, domains. So entity-based hunting, which is host name, user, IP address, file hashes, domain. And then we will also see if you are supporting a client in North America, they have the requirement to map every security detection with MITRE attack framework. So as part of summarizing that detection or closing that detection, you will need to provide the mapping with MITRE attack framework, wherein you will need to provide the information in terms of what is the tactic, techniques, and procedure used by or leveraged by threat actor to execute that threat on the endpoint. So you will be able to map those detections in CrowdStrike console to attacker tactics and techniques as defined in MITRE framework. Understand adversary behavior patterns. These are the key skills that we are going to cover in this certification. Then comes real-time response. I already talked about it, that you will perform live comments on endpoints, and it will also help you with remote investigation and remediation. So what is my incident response workflow? It starts with detection. Now, who is responsible for detecting the incident? This question is to the participant. Who is responsible here to detect the incidents? Charles, Sujit, Naveen,
So SOC analyst
who is responsible?
Yeah, the
Analyst.
analyst.
and a SOC analyst. SOC analyst.
That's
Okay. See, detection is a combined responsibility. The Falcon admin is configuring the security policies and control. The admin is configuring firewall policy, device control policy, IOCs, right? As part of those configuration, CrowdStrike Falcon agent or sensor is actually detecting is performing detections, or it basically looking into the endpoint for on write on execute operations. And if it identifies any action on the endpoint, any activity or behavior on the endpoint which conflicts or which is against the policy, configured policy, it generates a detection. So who is responsible to detect? The responsibility to detect is for the CrowdStrike. It's CrowdStrike tool responsibility or CrowdStrike responsibility to generate detections. And how it generates detections? Based on two factors. The first factor is administrative configuration that you are configuring in the console. So if you are configuring an IOC, and as part of that IOC, you have added a file hash and you have configured the action as block. Whenever a corresponding application with that file hash tries to execute or is executed on the endpoint, the sensor will be quick to contain or stop that behavior and generate a detection. So that's first aspect of detection. What is the second aspect of detection? The second aspect of detection is machine learning capability of CrowdStrike, which you are not configuring as an administrator. This capability is derived from cyber threat intel. So CrowdStrike has its own threat intel feed, which it receives from multiple threat intel sources. Based on that, it identifies malicious domains, malicious IP addresses, malicious file hashes, any new adversary or ransomware, malware which is getting introduced. It captures or it receives all of that knowledge or information, and it cascades that information to its sensors in near real time. And that is why sensors are able to identify zero-day attack, zero-day vulnerability. That's another aspect of it. So detection is a combined responsibility between CrowdStrike admins, who in the form of policies and control instruct the Falcon sensor to perform a certain action, which is either ignore that activity or generate a detection against that activity. And CrowdStrike internal intelligence, cyber threat intel, which is also responsible for it. So that's on the detection part. Then comes investigation part. Who is responsible for investigation? Sharat?
Now the SOC analyst.
Analyst. Uh, so we can call them incident responder. We can call them incident engineer. We can call them security analyst. The the terminology, the role name will differ from organization to organization. But yes, it's a human at the end of the day. It's an engineer, a security engineer or security analyst who is responsible for investigation. Then the same analyst is responsible for containment. Sometimes, if it is L1 analyst who is doing initial investigation, the after performing initial investigation, they summarize all the investigations. I'm saying they summarize all that they have investigated or all the areas that they've looked into, and then they forward that detection to a senior team member who has the containment capability. Because containment is a crucial operation, it's a critical operation. Imagine the detection is identified on a critical production database server, and that database server is providing access to multiple applications, is storing data for multiple critical applications. What if you network contain that database server? With immediate effect, it will lose all incoming and outgoing traffic, which means all the applications will be completely unavailable or partially unavailable. That may create a chaos in the environment. So containment is a crucial decision. Sometimes it is taken by L2 or L3 resources or subject matter experts, or it may require an additional approval from a senior before an analyst is allowed to perform containment. Then comes remediation. As part of remediation, if it is false positive, then L1 can take care of that part. But if it is true positive, and if it requires some some additional execution on the endpoint, for example, it may require uploading an additional scanning software to scan for certain adversaries, or it may require to delete something from the endpoint. Now, the delete may require a change request to be raised, because at the end of the day, you're not working as an individual, you're working for an organization that needs to comply with certain standards and compliances, an organization that has an incident management or ITSM in place, IT service management in module in place, an organization that follows the concept of incident management, problem management, program management, release and rollback management, change management. So there is a high probability that some remediation actions would require an emergency change to be raised, approved by competent authority before remediation is performed, right? So the objective is not just to prepare you for the interview, or the objective is not just to introduce you the capabilities which are there in the console. The objective is also to ensure that you are able to manage it as per the compliance and processes, right? So when you appear for an interview or when you handle internal processes using CrowdStrike, you need to make sure that you follow the ITSM process, which is very important because any change in the environment must have a supported change request in place, an approved change request. So this is the flow, which is detection, which is a combined effort between CrowdStrike and admin team, the customers or client admin team, investigation, containment, and remediation. Okay. Now this is the same flow that I was talking about. Uh, so this is the flow in detail. It says detection is generated in CrowdStrike Falcon platform, which is the detection phase. Then comes analysis phase. The security analyst reviews the detection. Reviews basically means look at the detection, Then validate alert details and context to ensure. So what is the first thing that comes to your mind? When you look at the detection, the first thing that you will check is what is the alert priority? What is the detection priority? What is the detection severity? Is it high, medium, low? Based on that, you will move on to the next phase. What if the detection priority is low, severity is low? Then you can probably ignore it. You can probably focus more on detections which are with high priority. So that's what alert details and context. Context basically the detection type. That's what you will look into. So I'll talk about the entire flow. I'll provide you a demo. As I said, there is no hands-on lab here. This requires more of a practice. So the more you look into detections, you navigate to all the areas which are there, you will gain more comfort with detection engineering. There is no fixed process. There is no 10-step process that I can give you. However, I have my own approach to look into security incidents, investigate and remediate. That is what I'm going to share with you, which will remain common across most of the security incidents. Then comes investigation phase. This is where you investigate. You investigate the affected endpoint. And as part of that investigation, you will look into the process timeline. If that detection is related to a malicious process, then you will look into the information in terms of who initiated the process. Was it user initiated or system initiated? If it was user initiated, then who that user is. Then you will probably look into the user timeline also, that whether that user has initiated the process on that system or multiple system at the same time. So it's like performing correlation. So you will analyze using process timeline, user timeline, device timeline, process tree. You will also, if you need to collaborate, if you need to perform correlation, you will use CrowdStrike query language. You can also use Shallow AI, which is Gen AI capability that will help you to write the context. You just need to provide the prompt in natural language. It will generate a corresponding CQL uh, based on that prompt, and it will execute that CQL and provide you the information. So we'll look at all of this as part of CCFR and CCFH, and also in SIEM engineer. Then identify attack behavior and scope, which is very important for the MITRE mapping perspective. Then comes decision phase. So let's say you're done with the investigation. You've identified that it's true positive. It's a real attack on the endpoint. Then you will classify that detection either as true positive or false positive. Close it, put certain notes to ensure that it is cascaded properly to the appropriate teams and departments. And also, similar detection will not reoccur in future. So how will you ensure that it will not reoccur in future? If it's true positive, you will probably add that to the block list. So true positive, which means that an endpoint was reported to be communicating to a malicious URL. After investigation, you've identified that yes, it's a malicious URL. And if this endpoint continues to contain to this malicious URL, there's a high probability to get a malware or ransomware or a security vulnerability or or let's say a malicious file or program on the endpoint. So in that case, what you will do, you will add that file hash, domain or URL to block list. So you will add it to the block list under IOC, and that capability is directly integrated into the console. You don't need to request, you don't need to generate a service request for your admin team to do it. You can do it yourself. And if it's false positive, then you will probably create an exception. So we have both the options, block list as well as exclusion. Then comes response phase. Now, as part of this phase, in the end, if required, you will kill that malicious process, you will contain that affected host, or you will perform additional remediation via real-time response by connecting to that host and performing some additional operations. This is the phase. So this is the flow. In this flow is common for all the investigations, all the security operations team. whether you are doing it using CrowdStrike, Sentinel-1, Microsoft Sentinel, Palo Alto, any Siemens source solution, any EDR, MDR, XDR solution, the flow will remain the same. There will be additional steps. You can double click on this flow and add additional steps, but this will be the flow, which is detection, triage, investigating, taking a decision, and performing the remediation. Okay, now we'll talk about attack framework. So this was the pre-read. I'm saying we have not yet started CCFR. CCFR starts from here. If you remember, when I was showing you the curriculum, in the curriculum, CCFR starts with attack framework. That's the first module. There are 6 modules in total. The first module is attack framework. So what is this attack framework? I would request everyone to open a web browser and in the web browser, you need to type attack.mitre.org. Attack.mitre.org. Now, when you click on attack.mitre.org, it opens this web page. So here you will see this attack framework. This attack framework, you can see it's a globally accessible knowledge base of adversaries, tactics and techniques based on real world observations. And they keep on updating it all the time. So it's a globally recognized knowledge base of adversaries, tactics and techniques, which is basically what methods or techniques a threat actor, a hacker, or a security breach would use to breach a system. So, for example, let's say a threat actor is able to identify an open port on an endpoint on a system and uses that open port to send some communication or to use that open port to deploy some malicious payload on the system, right? So that's what tactics, techniques, and procedure is all about. So that's where it basically talks about. So it says this knowledge base is used as foundation for development of specific threat models and methodologies in private sector, in government, and in cybersecurity product and so service community. Now, this model is globally recognized, and this is primarily used in North America. So if you're working with North American customers, you need to have knowledge of this model. In fact, most of the ISVs or most of the EDR, XDR, Siemens source solution, they have the capability to map a security detection, security incident with MITRE framework. Now let's see the attack matrix. These are matrix. So what I request all of you to do, give yourself 10 minutes, read all of these matrix. You will see a total of 14 matrix here. And under those matrix, so this is the matrix name, which is reconnaissance. Then it shows the techniques used by threat actors to execute this type of attack. So just give yourself a quick read of these matrix as well as techniques. When you click on any of these techniques, now let's say you come across this one of the techniques, and the technique says, let's pick up this compromise accounts, which is under resource development, or let's say initial access, which is somebody is trying to access the system. So valid accounts, Wi-Fi networks, all of these are techniques. Now over here, when you click on one of the techniques, it will provide you the details of that techniques. So this is the details of the techniques here. You can see the technique ID, which is T1, T1586. You will see sub techniques, sub methods. Techniques is nothing but a method through which threat actor will try to execute an attack will try to compromise an endpoint. So what are the sub methods, sub techniques available? The tactics, which is resource deployment. Tactics basically means what they are trying to do exactly, and then what method they are following to perform that action. All the information is available here. So you will see compromised accounts, and here there are three types of accounts, which is social media accounts, email accounts, and cloud accounts. And for each, you will see the tactics. So if you click on one, then it shows compromised accounts, social media accounts. Then similarly, you have email accounts. These are the three types of accounts that can be compromised. So these are sub techniques. So I request you all to spend 10 minutes going through the matrix right now. Tactics we'll talk about. We already have some detections in our respective console. All of you, most of you have attended the CCFA training. As part of that training, you already have configured IOCs, you've configured policies, and those policies have generated detections. So we will pick up those detections and we'll see whether those detections contain any of this information in terms of tactics, techniques, and procedure. All right, so we talked about attack matrix. Now these are the tactics that you see here, and then techniques. So as I said, now understand what would happen or what used to happen a couple of years ago. Most of the security tools and solutions, be it CrowdStrike, Sentinel-1, Palo Alto, McAfee, Mvision, I still remember working with them. They did not have mapping capability to MITRE framework. Now, because of lack of capability to map a specific detection or incident with MITRE framework, it becomes very difficult for a security engineer to manually map it. However, the customer, because most of the customers that we were supporting, I'm talking about from India, or let's say from Asian geography, most of the customers that we were supporting from North America and Europe. Now, as part of their compliance or their agreement, they would require every incident to be mapped as per MITRE framework. So the engineer would manually identify the most appropriate tactics and technique and manually map that incident to MITRE framework. And sometimes they are not 100% accurate or right in their judgment. So this used to be the pain that security engineers or incident responders would feel in the past. But today, most of the EDR solutions, SIEM and SOAR solutions, they have inbuilt capability to map a specific detection, alert, threat, incident with MITRE framework. They automatically map it. Now, sometimes that mapping may be inaccurate. However, the chances are very low. I'm saying, let's say 1 or 2% out of 100, the mapping would be inaccurate or partially correct. In that case, you might want to manually map it or rectify it. So that's how mapping works. Now, if you click on any of these, it will basically provide you information about it. So for example, reconnaissance. Now, what is reconnaissance? It basically means now as part of a cyber threat kill chain or as part of attack chain, this is the very first step. When you want to perform or execute a threat, or when you want to, as a threat actor, let's say you're part of a threat actor group, you are an individual, hacker or threat actor, or you are state sponsored, nation sponsored. There are different types of threat actors. So when you want to execute a cyber attack or a threat on your subject, now that subject could be an individual, subject could be an organization. When I say an organization, it could be a government organization, it could be a private entity, it could be a small, medium business, or a large enterprise. That is known as subject. So when you want to execute an attack on subject, you will follow certain method, you will take certain steps, you will perform certain activity. Now that method, steps, and activity is tactics, techniques, and procedure. So what is the first one is reconnaissance. Now, what is reconnaissance? It basically means gathering as much information as possible about the target, about the subject, right? So how do you get more information about the subject? One of the method to gain information about the subject is phishing. You can send an email to the subject, to the victim. The victim will probably trust that email or will think that email has come from an authentic source, and victim will be persuaded to provide crucial information as part of that email. So the email will probably say that your account is getting deactivated today. If you want to keep your account active, please click on this link or provide this information. And victim will provide that information thinking that it's a legitimate email. That's a type of reconnaissance wherein you are gathering information. Or you can probably, the other method is a threat actor can perform a port scanning, can identify the public IP address space of that organization. Let's say you want to deploy a malicious payload at your subject environment. Your subject is an organization. It's an entity, private limited entity, let's say ABC Corp, and you want to deploy a payload on ABC Corp network. How do you deploy? You don't have access to that network, but somehow you're able to gain the public IP address space, which is easy. So you gain the public IP address space of that network, and then you perform a port scan. There are multiple solutions. You have freeware as well as paid softwares available through which you can perform port scanning. So you initiate a port scan to identify if there are any open port in that network which are listening ports. And if you identify that listening port, you can probably use those port to send a malicious payload. So that's another type of gathering information reconnaissance. So there are different type of methods or techniques through which you can execute this type of attack. You can see here it says active scanning, which is port scanning, gathering victim host information, gathering victim identity information, gathering victim network information, gather victim org information. How can you get all of this information? Nowadays, we can use social media, professional media to gain that information. So if you just know the name of the person, you can probably search that person over the social media, over professional media, and then you can get the information on social media. In the person's profile, you can probably get their phone number, their email address, the other information. Same is the case with, let's say, LinkedIn. If you search for a professional on LinkedIn, there is a high probability that professional has provided his or her contact information publicly or allowed LinkedIn to publish that information. So you can easily get the email address or phone number of that person. Now, phone number is a crucial PII, personal identifiable information. You can directly reach out to that person, or you can execute reconnaissance attack. You can probably send a text message to that person, persuading that person to take certain action, right? So gathering information, querying public AI services. Now, public AI services. So you have LLM, you have Gen AI. Gen AI, the people who are using Gen AI. For example, I use Microsoft Copilot. And using Copilot, I search for information with respect to Microsoft solutions. When I am delivering a training on Microsoft technology, if I need to put together a TOC, or if I need some ready-made information, I search it on Copilot. Now I have a login for Copilot. So Copilot actually has my information. But what level of information Copilot is actually sharing with people out there? What information it is keeping confidential? That's where AI services comes into the picture. So few AI, open source AI services wherein you don't pay anything in return to make use of those AI services, there's a high probability that those AI services are actually sharing your information with other users. So querying public AI services, search closed sources. Closed sources basically means portals where which have information available. However, it requires specific login on access. Search open technical database, search open websites, domains, search threat vendors data, search victims owned websites. All of that is a method through which you can gain as much information as possible. That's one of the matrix. Then comes resource development. What is resource development? Which is gaining, once again, this is the next step in as part of resource development. It involves creating, purchasing, or compromising resources that can be used to support targeting. So probably I want uh, to gain information about a person or entity. So what I do in order to gain information about that person or entity, I also subscribe to the same service or to the same database or to the same portal that I may think my victim or that person or entity is subscribed to, so that I become part of the same platform and I will be able to see the other person as member. For example, if I know that the person is on Facebook, I may end up creating an account on Facebook. Now, since I am an active member of Facebook, my victim is a member of Facebook, there's a high probability I will be able to see some information about that person, depending on how how my victim has configured his or her profile or visibility options. So that's resource development, which is acquire access, acquire infrastructure, domains, DNS server, virtual private server, basically becoming part of the same network, same infrastructure, same uh, you know same resources, gaining access to the same resources that your victim may have access to. That's resource development. Then comes another, which is initial access. What is initial access? This is where you try to gain access. So, which is SQL injection. There are different injection methods. So you have SQL injection, wherein if your databases are not configured for specific capabilities, which is your databases are not configured for content filtering or content formatting capabilities, you a threat actor will be able to execute SQL injection attack, content injection attack, or hardware additions, phishing, which is gaining access, sphere link. For example, in the phishing, you can probably in your phishing email you can put an image, and behind the image you can provide a link of any desk or team viewer. As soon as your victim will click on that link, it will automatically deploy team viewer on any desk on their system and probably give you access to their system in the backend. You can put a script that will automatically pick up the ID and password from the victim system, and it will also take administrative access of victim system to allow access to a threat actor. So these type of attack also happens. That is why they always say as a best practice to not click on any unknown links or image, because a malicious payload may be hidden behind an image also, which is technography attack. So this is another type of matrix. Then we have execution matrix. As part of this matrix, you will execute certain actions on victim system, victims network, victims organizations. So that's execution, which is you may end up taking access of PowerShell or Windows command shell, Unix shell, JavaScript. Through JavaScript, you can put a malicious payload on victim's browser. When victim tries to access a specific website, that payload will be downloaded on the victim's browser, and from there it can perform a scanning of the victim's browsing history and any session token or access token which is there on the browser. Nowadays, most of the websites, they use the concept of identity provider and service provider. Basically, they use the concept of single sign-on. So as part of single sign-on, there is an access token which is saved in the browser, and with that token you can have access to that website for a specific duration, right? So the malicious payload or that JavaScript or that cookie can actually capture that access token and reuse that access token on a different system, depending on whether that token is written in JSON or YAML. So these are the options. Then comes another, which is persistence. Persistence basically means maintaining access. So sometimes a threat actor is able to put a spyware, a keylogger, or any type of malicious payload on your system. Let's say a malware, and that malware will continue to remain on the system. it will not be discovered or it will not be detected by an existing security solution, and it will continue to deliver its job role and responsibilities. So it basically consists of techniques which is used to keep access to systems across restarts, change credentials, and other interruptions that could cut off their access. So the threat actor will continue to persist access of the system, continue to maintain access of the system by any means, which is different types of options. Additional cloud credentials, additional email persistence, SSHA authorized key device registrations. There are multiple methods. Now, MITRE is quite dynamic because threat landscape is very dynamic. As we speak, there are threat actors who are trying to find ways to manipulate, to corrupt a remote system. We have ethical hackers who are performing penetration testing of their environment to ensure that they are able to identify all attack surfaces and they are able to plug the leak. As we speak, we have security vendors who, by virtue of various threat intel feeds that they receive, are trying to update or or strengthen their existing security solution. So this continues to happen. And that is where this MITRE framework is also very dynamic. So you will continue to see additional techniques getting added, additional matrix also there. When they started, they only had 6 matrix. Today they have 14. Tomorrow they may end up adding more, or they may end up adding additional techniques to these matrices, right? So persistence, you can see there are many in persistence. Then comes privilege escalation, wherein a threat actor is able to compromise an administrative identity or is able to is able to escalate uh, a normal user to an administrator and be able to perform certain activities, which is privilege escalation through brute force attack, through different types of attack, password spray attack, dictionary attack, birthday attack. There are different types of attack through which privilege escalation is possible. Then comes stealth, defense, impairment, credential access, discovery. Now, I will not get into the details of all of it. These are available here. I would request all the participants to spend some time, probably today, tomorrow, over the week, over the next week, and go through all of these techniques, and see what are they. This is very important if you work as part of detection engineer. Even if you are in engineering team, wherein your job is to deploy, design, and architect the solution, even though you should have access to this information, you should be familiar with this information. These should not be alien to you. These keywords should be quite familiar to you, right? So these are all the information that we have here. In the end, we have impact. So these are all the techniques which are available, matrices which are available here. Now, most of the common matrices that you will find in most of the detections that you will find few things which are quite common, which is reconnaissance, initial access, execution, persistence, privilege escalation, credential access, lateral movement in case of a ransomware, in case of a malware or a malicious payload or a worm, you will find lateral movement, collection, and then exfiltration, and command and control also C2. So these are common matrices, tactics, and techniques which are there. Is everyone with me on this? Okay. So now you can see it. Let's do it. Let's revise it quickly. So MITRE is a globally recognized knowledge base of adversaries. It built on real world cyber attack observations, and they keep on updating it. It helps map how attackers operate, move, and achieve objectives. Tactics, techniques, and procedure. What does this provide? It provides techniques, the why part, how part, and the method. So why, which is high level attacker goals, which is initial access, execution, persistence, lateral movement. We've looked at all of these tactics. Then techniques. What techniques did they use? So in order to gain access to a system, a threat actor sends an email. A user clicks on that email that puts a malicious payload on the system, which by virtue of lateral movement spreads to all other systems, and hence the entire network is compromised. So that's technique. PowerShell execution, credential dumping represents how the attack is performed. Basically, technique. What technique was used to execute that attack? Tactics is goal. Then sub techniques. So inside techniques, you will have sub techniques. For example, phishing is a technique, but inside phishing, they had steganography attack executed through which a malicious payload installed on the system. Then real world context maps techniques to known threat actors, malware families, attack campaigns.